welcome back to Let's Talk Music. We've reached episode 7, and that's phenomenal considering my lack of consistency. So, thank you so much for listening to me so far. And this episode that we have today is going to be extremely educational, so feel free to take notes. He's one of the few journalists in India covering the independent music scene in the country. And personally, and I think across the industry, his opinion and insights have been looked up to and respected over the years. And if I'm not mistaken, he's been doing this for nearly 2 decades. I don't want to take away from his youth, and perhaps it's been flooding his inbox with requests from artists and other industry stakeholders. And he's written for some of the biggest or the biggest publications in India and the world alike, like Billboard, First Post, India Today, Musically, Rolling Stone, Scroll, Guardian, and I think the list goes on. So he just moderated a panel at the All About Music virtual conference last week, and I'm really thankful to him for taking time out to do this episode with me. Welcome to Let's Talk Music, Amit, and thank you once again for doing this.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and for that very flattering introduction. I am a fan of the podcast. I've heard a lot of episodes and I've learned a lot. And I've learned so much from you, I have to say. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you actually enjoyed those episodes because, I realized the initial few, this monologue doesn't really work all the time. So it's great to have people from the industry chatting.
Yeah. No, but
So,
the monologue, actually, the first one,
hmm,
which I think was on copyright, is
yeah,
extremely helpful for me because, you have the ability to break things down in a very simple way, uh, and
thank
I
you.
think that's quite essential. And I am sort of, I'm constantly trying to figure these things out. So,
Right. Yeah, and I think there's so much of information out there. So it is also one of the reasons that I decided to start the podcast because I thought, okay, at least like there's one place that people can, get to know a few things at least, if nothing else.
yeah, I mean,
So
like I said, I have brushed up my knowledge about a number of these subjects and copyright law and royalties and
perfect,
all of that stuff.
perfect. So how's the pandemic been treating you?
I mean, it's luckily. I mean, I in the sense that I have fairly been quite. I mean, I have no health issues, and
Mm,
but I think rather than the pandemic, I think it's the lockdown that has really affected everybody. And yeah, I,
yeah.
mean, I have also been affected by it in the sense that I was just telling somebody the other day that I think I'm in a relatively sort of, I wouldn't say better position, but perhaps more equipped to deal with this because I am an introvert. I barely go out. Sort of, my only sort of going out activity was literally going for gigs. So obviously
Okay.
I miss those. I mean, I miss
Yeah.
those a lot. But like in terms of, and the occasional sort of meeting friends, which I also miss. But by and large, I'm quite happy to be at home most of the time. And I've been
Okay.
working from home for the
Yeah.
last 5 years. So even that
Yeah.
hasn't been too much of an adjustment.
Correct.
So in that sense, yeah, it hasn't affected me too much. But yeah, of course, work-wise, there have been budget cuts across the board. We talked
Mm,
about some of the international publications that I work with. Some of them have had to have,
mm,
they've sort of stopped commissioning stuff
okay.
with the regularity they used to. So, so
Yeah.
it's had sort of an effect. But
Yeah.
and then yeah, some publications have reduced their honorariums and stuff like that.
Right.
But like
Yeah.
by and large, I think like I have to be grateful for
Yeah.
sort of how this thing I am had to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that was actually what I wanted to ask next, whether it's impacted you work wise. I mean, because from what I see, the indie scene in India has been bustling, so there's been a lot of stuff that's been happening and to, keep you engaged and occupied as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
So
yeah.
I mean, so in terms of the work from Indian publications, actually, that's not stopped at all.
Yeah.
So I've had quite a bit of work from Indian publications. The only thing is that when it comes to sort of,
Payment.
income,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean, in the sense that there's a big difference between the exchange rate, the dollar
Yeah.
exchange rate, sort of, and
I
which is,
know. Yeah.
so like you do one piece for a foreign publications is like equal to like three pieces of sometimes five pieces that you do here. So,
Wow, yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty. So, I mean, just to go back to basics, like how did you get into music journalism specifically? Like what was your motivating factor?
So I think with everybody who's related to this scene, it starts with the love for music, and that's where I started too. I think I became a music journalist just by a process of elimination.
Okay.
I always loved music. I wasn't particularly good at I mean, I didn't really actually even attempt. I didn't have a natural sort of ability for say a musical instrument or anything like that. I didn't really pursue it, but I always loved music. I would listen. I'm an introvert, like I mentioned, and one of my favorite activities as a kid was just listening to the radio,
Yeah.
and I would listen to the radio for hours every day. And so I'm always interested in music. I'd buy all the music magazines. Actually, I grew up in Dubai, so
Oh,
I
okay.
went to school there. So there they had this radio channel called Dubai 92 FM, which was at that time the only sort of FM
In,
channel, and you could play the international
yeah.
hits. They would play the American Top 40 Countdown, the UK countdown, and that was really my introduction to music. And I really loved, like I said, I mean, one of my favorite things to do was just listen to music. And growing up there, I think a lot of these things is quite interesting because circumstances also affect and your unique sort of where you are in a particular place and time can really affect who
Correct.
you eventually what you eventually do. And so at that
Yeah.
time really this was in the late 80s and the
Mm.
early 90s. And
Mm.
at that time in Dubai there used to be this pirate company. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know that they were pirates at the time, but the irony is that they used to call themselves, the company was called Thompson Originals. Okay.
Oh, okay. The irony.
Yeah. Thomsun. And I think that they were cassette manufacturers, but they'd also,
Hey, okay, yeah. Thompson Originals.
they would also, you might have had any connection to the Gulf in any sort of way. You probably have been gifted a Thompson
Yeah.
tape at some point in your life.
Yeah, it
Uh,
sounds familiar.
so they would actually sell albums, like cassette
Mm.
albums, for 5 dirhams, which wasn't a
Okay.
lot of money at that point of time, actually, which is it was like a week's pocket money,
Okay.
perhaps, when you were really young. So
Mm.
I would just spend that on cassettes. And so it was if I like one song, I'd buy the
Mm.
entire tape.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even think about it. And so in that sense, I sort of really listened to a very wide variety of music.
Right.
And what was great about even I would say chart music or popular music at that time, that there was no real distinction. I mean, music wasn't just compartmentalized into the way it is right now. People, you wouldn't only just be pop
Yeah.
music at that time
Yeah.
encompass such a wide range of sound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything from pop to rock to metal to hip
Correct.
hop to to dance music, or what is today the modern form of dance music that has its origins in I mean, it's crazy, but I remember when I was 10 years old, I
Huh.
was listening to acid house.
Ah, yeah, 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 yeah,
without
yeah.
without without knowing what it
Knowing
was,
what it is,
and
yeah.
without ever having
Right.
any clue what the concept of a rave was, or
Yeah, yeah.
but just because that was what was topping the UK charts at the time.
Yeah.
And it was interesting music, and I
Yeah.
liked it. I mean, I think when you're also a kid, you have your
You
ears
have
are
a,
so much more open. I
yeah,
think when you
more
become a
curious.
teenager, then you sort of start having become a little more cliquey.
Yeah.
You want to sort of identify with a certain set of people, so you want to listen to a type of music. But when you're fairly young, you don't
Correct.
care. You just like something, and
Yeah.
that's what you listen to. Yeah.
That, yeah.
So,
But
should I'm giving you a very long answer here, but
no, but
essentially,
that's okay. That it kind of defines, your exposure to music and how you got into it. Because that's pretty much, I mean, even me being a lawyer in this industry has stemmed from that same love for music and the kind of exposure I've had to. But I've grown up in India, so all of it I've consumed so much of the film industry, Bollywood music.
yeah,
But back in the 90s, you had a very vibrant indie scene, so to speak. I mean, like
yeah,
the non-film music, like your Alicia Chennai and Shweta Shetty, Sunita Rao, like all of these are people that you've grown up listening to, and it's just
yeah,
I see that significant change now, and I think we will get to that, over the course of our conversation today.
yeah.
So
I mean, I think it's just so exciting for somebody who's say, young right now, right? Somebody who's just who's 8 or 9 years right now, who's
yeah,
just getting exposed to so much of music, so much of Indian music that
yeah,
we never
yeah,
had a chance to, sort of listen to. I mean, yeah, I mean the 90s pop scene came a little later on for me, and But yeah, Bollywood was always around.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
though like Bollywood, like the films were fairly terrible. I mean, there was the occasional soundtrack that would sort of,
Yeah,
that would sort of break the clutter, whether it
yeah,
was, Ek Do Teen from Teza, or
yeah,
whether it
yeah,
was Kayamat Se Kayamat Tak,
yeah.
those sort of transcended the whole,
Correct.
sort of Bollywood not being cool, but like still, you liking the music
The
for it.
music, right?
And
Exactly.
yeah. So essentially, I always loved music, but then my parents, being typical Indian parents, like never. I mean, it was never something that was even considered as a career. I studied commerce.
Mm.
I sort of did my BCom, and then this is something that I rarely ever tell people, but I've actually done an MBA, which was
Oh,
a complete waste of time and money. Luckily, I didn't spend too much money because I got into Pune University, and that's the only thing that makes me feel slightly less guilty about it, is because I went to a government institute and my fees were like 1/10 of a private college. But I wasted a lot of time doing
okay.
an MBA, and then I sort of came to finally this crossroads when I figured that I said to myself and to my parents that, look, I've done everything you asked me to do, but I really don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want a career in like commerce or finance. I want
Yeah.
something that I really enjoy doing.
Mm.
Um, and I think that and the one sort of skill that I had, I think that I established was that in
Mm.
school, I was always good at writing. I mean, I would
Mm.
write for the school
Magazine.
newspaper, and
Mm.
I would write for whatever school magazine. And,
Mm.
I was always sort of like, that was something that, one of the things I was good at, like, uh, and sort of gave me a sense of confidence. And
Yeah.
then I decided, okay, maybe I can combine these two things. I mean, I've
Mm.
always been reading music magazines all my life.
Mm.
I like music, I like writing. Maybe I can be a music writer.
Mm.
And so through a series of like, events, I sort of eventually managed to forge a career in it. I went and did a year of journalism school in Australia.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
to sort of to make sure I had like adequate training. But
Mm.
after that, it's just been a process of sort of like working
Yeah.
with different organizations and
Mm.
getting to where I am right now.
So, did you start working in India or was it
Yeah,
outside?
so all my working life has been in India.
Ah.
My first job was not technically a journalism job. It was working for Times Music at the time, and sort of
Okay.
writing content for the music label's website, which
Uh-huh.
I don't even know whether that music label, that website launched, because I sort of left less than
Okay.
a year after joining to go to Australia. So
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah, so it was a fairly short stint there, but that was like technically my first writing job.
A job. Okay. Interesting. So that means you have worked with the label.
And not a label,
Yeah,
a
technically
website over there.
speaking.
Yeah, I didn't really. I mean, there was limited interaction with the label, but yeah.
Yeah. So that means, like we discussed, you've written for some of like the largest international publications as well. In terms of standards in journalism,
Mhm.
maybe more specifically with music as well, but in terms of overall how they treat it, what would you think have been, what do you think has been the difference that you have faced?
Well, I think that I mean, it's a little tricky thing to answer,
Mm.
because I don't think that, you know, firstly, we don't really have too many music publications in India.
That's true.
and
Yeah.
and I have been working with music publications internationally. So
Right.
it's not an apples to apples comparison.
So
Uh,
it's like you setting a standard in India, actually, technically speaking.
I don't know about that, but like, uh,
Yeah.
but in the sense, so it's also the kind of stuff that you write, right? Sometimes you're doing like a simple profile.
Hmm.
There's not much kind of, you know, there isn't. It's pretty straightforward. But
Right.
like, if you're doing like a music industry piece, that requires a little more
Hmm.
kind of
Investigation.
discussion,
Yeah.
yeah, and sort of investigation, discussion, all of that. So yeah, but I would say that, like, I mean, not the publications that I have worked with,
Hmm.
but like, there's definitely a difference between the way the Indian media works and the international media works.
Hmm.
And I can give you an example. I know you're probably going to ask me about this at some point, but I like when the whole Badshah's
Ha.
record thing happened.
Yeah.
Uh, Sony put out this press release saying that we've broken the 24-hour record. And I was actually, when I heard about it, and because it was on social media before they sent out the press release.
Yeah.
And I was very excited about it. And the first thing that I did was contacted my editor at Billboard, and I said, look, hey, you know what? This is big news for the Indian music industry. It's a huge achievement. I think we should write about it. And he said, yeah, sure, go ahead and do all of that. And then, so I got in touch with Sony. Sony was extremely helpful. They, helped me speak, got me on a call with Bacha immediately. And so I did all that. I did all the groundwork for it. And I said that, there's one piece, and I told this to the person at Sony that I was speaking with. I was like, you know what? I need you to give me a confirmation from YouTube that this record has actually been set. Because I know that Billboard will not accept this piece. And, because it's not enough for you to just say that you've broken the record. We need an official confirmation for them to run this as is.
Correct.
So, they said, yeah, of course, we'll put you in touch with YouTube, and, we will sort of sort that out for you and all of that. But they went ahead, put out the press release. Not every, but a lot of media publications
covered it,
just published it as verbatim. And it's weird because they have this thing where they sort of they reproduce these press releases, and they'll have a line over there saying that this is something that we've not had. This is a press release, we haven't had any, nobody's edited it. But then why run it in the first place, right? You're so desperate for content because you are a website, you have to just keep churning it out. So you're putting out something that is like fairly big news, but you have no verification whatsoever.
Exactly. Right.
And so I was hanging on to that story, and we can discuss that a little later in this conversation. But my story was on hold because I knew that until YouTube gave the confirmation, which never came, as you well know, I couldn't run it. So I think that gives you an example of the difference in the standards of it was not even a conversation I had to have with the editor. I knew that they would not accept it without that confirmation.
Yeah. But you're saying perhaps, anyway, in the Indian publications did come out with the news. And I remember seeing a couple of them. And in fact, I think there was a discussion initiated by you on Facebook around this couple of months when it came out, right? Yeah, I remember that conversation. So, so actually now let's connect it back to that. So now since we know, since the new case against Badshah of buying those streams or views, so how does this impact the credibility of streams anywhere? And how do you think that's going to affect artists on a long-term basis?
So what's interesting is that since last year, since this whole Badshah's Pagal episode, I haven't seen any label come out with similar claims, because he was not the first to do this. I mean, I think that the only thing that he did was that he claimed to break and I've talked about this before. I mean, I think that unfortunately for him, he was taking on BTS, and I don't even know whether he knew it. And BTS fans are so passionate and so sort of watchful about everything that involves their their idols, that literally he didn't realize that he was saying I'm breaking BTS's record. And that was, I think, what unfortunately for him was really sort of the undoing. Because it's not the first time. You've had I think TC in the past claiming that a music video for Guru Randhawa and Pitbull had some collaboration, and then they claimed that was, I mean, the figure was much less. It was some 33 million or something, claiming that it was a record at the time. And it just, again, press release went out. It was sort of nobody bothered to verify it and all of that, but it didn't get the kind of I think attention that I think that this Badshah song did, because I think that even it was just simply another one of the press releases that we had released, as opposed to this big hoo-ha. Sony even released an ad in the Bombay Times claiming that they had broken the record. And very, very interestingly, they used a YouTube play button, but they didn't mention YouTube. In the ad. So
I
So
mean,
what
yeah,
I think
I
is
can
that,
think of like 100 legal problems with
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I think that what has happened because of that is like I'm sure people are still buying these views.
Hmm.
I don't think it's illegal or criminal
Hmm.
because under it is not something that I don't think case has been filed against Bacha. I don't think a case will be. I don't think there's any legal standing because he's not the only person to do this. And if
Hmm.
they wanted to call him in for questioning, they should call in all the label bosses of all the major record companies as well.
Hmm.
He was singled out, I think, just because of this particular instance getting a lot of international media attention. But
Correct.
uh, but I think that if you as somebody who's interested in the music industry wants to literally uh, or if you are a music and anybody who's working in the music industry and you want to verify
Hmm.
whether any of this is true, I mean there are lots of tools that you can do to cross check
Hmm.
this. And how I sort of knew that something was up with the whole Pagal
Yeah.
recount was,
Yeah.
I mean, this is again something unique to me.
Hmm.
Was being a really big chart geek and like following the
Hmm.
music charts carefully and
Yeah.
realizing that YouTube is not getting back to me. They're just being very silent about this. They're not saying yes or no, which was even more suspicious. Uh,
Yeah.
so but then I knew that the song was out on a Wednesday and
Hmm.
it's a 24-hour record. So and that the YouTube charts track the period from Friday to Thursday. Even
Huh.
so, they publish on a Sunday, but they tell you the views from the previous Friday to the
Huh.
Thursday. And
Okay.
like if it's 75 million views,
Yeah.
it's obviously like the most viewed video of the week.
Yeah.
But it did not appear on the chart. I mean, nowhere. So even the last number 100, it's a 100 position chart.
Huh.
Number one is whatever, on average, some 35, 40 million.
Huh.
Number 100 might be 5 million.
Okay.
It was not even 5 million. So that gives
Oh,
you an idea of
wow.
how many genuine views they were because YouTube
Yeah.
very interestingly says that they finally came out with an official statement stating this that our charts are
Hmm.
sacred and we don't count these. So it's a very sort of having your cake and eating it situation because they will sell these views,
Yeah.
but they will only count official views and they will show that view count, the sort of allegedly fake view count
Hmm.
so a song will show 100 million, but on
Yeah.
the charts, that song may not appear if there's not 100 million genuine views. If only the 1 million genuine views will count towards the chart.
Oh,
So,
God. Hmm.
uh, so Pagal was nowhere, not even number 100. So then it was pretty clear to me that, look, so then Billboard said, cool, let's just run it because now we have some kind of logical kind of evidence.
Yeah.
Though they're not confirming that
Yeah.
that obviously this something's wrong. This is not actually a record or whatever. It's been, and Bacha himself came out with that Instagram story and all that. So
Yeah.
we were able to put all the pieces together. But
Hmm.
so again, very long answers I'm giving you, but like
No, no, good, good, good. Go
I
ahead.
think that if you're somebody in the music industry, if you're a promoter or
Yeah.
you are like somebody who a brand and you
Yeah.
want to figure out how do I cross check this information, it's very simple. You
Hmm.
have the YouTube chart, which is the official sort of document of
Hmm.
views,
Okay.
and you just cross check across platforms. I mean, if a song is doing well, it's going to do well across platforms. It's unlikely that a
Exactly.
song is going to blow up on one platform and not do well on, like, say, do extremely well on YouTube, but be nowhere on the audio streaming chart.
Hmm.
It will
Correct.
probably be on at least on like if it's a regional music track
Hmm.
and it's like doing very well on YouTube, it will be somewhere on like the Ghana chart or the Jio Savan chart, or it
Yeah.
will be somewhere there. I mean,
Correct.
it won't just like randomly not be on anything.
That's
But
true.
I think that this has had a sort of effect because, like I said, I haven't heard of any more talk from labels saying, we broke this record anymore. I think that,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing. Yeah.
That's a good thing, yeah, seriously. And
Yeah.
the other day, like I came across this article on how there are these Spotify streaming farms.
Hmm.
And this was in Germany, and there was
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they had basically been like booked
Yeah.
and
Yep. So,
suspended or something. I mean,
yeah, I
and
haven't
it,
heard any
it
of that in India though. I haven't heard of
I
anything.
know,
It's
but
audio
what are
stream.
the odds? I'm certain that it will. There is a business of streaming farms in India as well. It's just that we are not probably see if Bacha can buy likes or buy followers.
Mhm.
What is preventing an entity to provide this as a service? And how does that affect the So because at the end of the day, the streams and the impressions and the downloads and all of that and the views also link to revenue, right? Not just YouTube, but I'm talking about Spotify specifically.
Yeah,
Like if you
yeah,
have a fake streaming farm, if you're employing
yeah.
one of those, how do I and you can be a really crap artist and
Mm.
just do that just because you have money.
Yeah. So,
So how do I don't know how that's going to impact artists and credibility, more
mm,
importantly. It's just, does an artist claiming 100,000 streams or followers on a Spotify or an Apple Music matter and anymore? And is this going to affect that the privilege of having that many streams on these platforms? So I think Wolfpack did something, but that was basically they released an album which was 7 tracks of just silence and
mm,
got their fans to
stream it.
stream it, and they made $20,000 out of it. But
Yeah.
that is not hiring a service, right? Like, for example, Spotify shaved off 5 million streams
Of BTS.
from Dynamite.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just going to come to that, but I
Yeah.
think the good thing with the audio streaming services, at least with Spotify, and I presume Apple may be having something similar. I don't know about the Indian streaming services, but they do have these sort of inbuilt checks, right? Now,
Huh.
why did they shave off those millions of streams from Dynamite, which by the way was whatever some 12 million, and eventually
Yeah.
was like 7 million. So
7 million.
I mean, it's a crazy amount. So
Yeah.
the inbuilt mechanism is that if there is a limited amount of streams that they count from one, I think, account over a 24-hour period. So
Why?
because it's exactly because of things like that, because of bot farms and things like that. So, but the difference here with BTS is actually these obsessive fans
Obsessive fans,
streaming it
exactly.
over and over again,
Yeah.
right? So if they can do that to genuine streams, which technically, I mean, a BTS guy, the fan is army member is not. It's not exactly a fake stream. I mean, okay, maybe
Exactly.
they're putting it on like autoplay and doing other things, but like
Yeah.
there's a real passion behind the reason for this, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they have this inbuilt mechanism. Sure, there might be somebody trying to game the system, but I don't think, I mean, I think with the audio streaming, and I haven't heard any of such incident. I haven't even heard I mean, maybe I just haven't heard them yet, but like I haven't heard, or this is just something that's waiting to be uh, come out in the open because of what's happened in Germany. But
Mm.
as far as I know, there's nothing that I've heard about audio streams being gamed.
Mm.
Uh, I have my own opinion about the radio chart in the country, but like,
Yeah.
uh,
We'll get to that.
but as far as audio streams, I mean, they seem to be the most legit out of all the various sort of
Okay.
popularity gauges that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So cool. So now, since we're talking about streaming platforms, how do you think this is, especially given the current situation where live performances are no longer a reliable source of income? How
Mm.
important is streaming? And, from the Indian perspective, I think there are a few things which artists are just slowly figuring out in terms of like how are they going to collect royalties, owning masters, owning publishing, and all of that.
Mm.
So, what is your opinion on streaming platforms in India, and their reliability as an income source?
Well, I think that you know streaming platforms have been, like, we cannot discount the fact that they have been game changing
Mm,
for independent artists. I mean, whatever you might say about the payouts and how little artists actually get compensated for their
yeah.
music. But I mean, I just, as somebody who has, like, you mentioned uh, me having done this for 2 decades, and I'm like, I'm an old fogey in this scene, and I can tell you that, like, back in the day,
Yeah.
I mean, how did musicians sell their music, right? They would make these homemade CDs, and they would, like, have a little
Yeah.
stand, a little table at a gig, and that's literally where you bought it. And there was no
Yeah.
question of royalties. It was like literally a one-time thing, right? You
Correct.
bought this CD off them, and that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so what streaming services have really done is they have really democratized the distribution of music, which has really been revolutionary for, like, independent musicians who can never have a hope to get onto radio or TV even till
Ab-
today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have the ability to sort of distribute your music,
Mm.
which the only way you had back then was to play live, and you can't possibly play live. You could only play live in your city or like big cities, or
Mm.
or at best go to college festivals across the country. Now your music is available for not only the entirety of the country; it's available for the world,
Mm.
and and that is something that has definitely been of immense benefit to independent musicians everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's obviously problematic that you know uh, the amount of money you get for
Correct.
your every time your music is streamed is dismal, and I think that this is just it is. There's been a lot of discussions about this, especially now when live concerts are not really a possibility, of how streaming for it to be to be an actual source of income of like substantial income, a lot of this
Mm.
needs to be fixed. And there's
Yeah.
been a fair amount of conversation about maybe that there should be a shift to user-centric payouts, and that how
Mm.
Deezer is the only one that has experimented with this, but like they have also been doing this for some time, but they haven't yet come out with some kind of report yet.
Yeah.
And there's great reluctance on behalf of the music industry to adopt this system, even though there's been a whole lot of conversation on how this might be really a better way to go.
Okay.
Uh, and of course the huge amount of vested interest. Right
Right.
now, whether it's labels, whether it's artists, you have a handful of people getting a whole lot of the pie.
Mm.
So whether I think user-centric payments would be an experiment that I hope that eventually the global music industry comes. User-centric payouts is something that we at least try it and see where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point about streaming and the idea of whether it is um, actually ever going to be some kind of you know where there's going to be like an actual source of income for artists. Now, I have written about this recently, and
Mm.
I also did a little bit of research
Mm.
uh, for this conversation because I
Okay.
knew that there would be some discussion around this. Now, so I had recently done a piece about how independent musicians were doing during the lockdown, whether the fact that there's been no Bollywood music, whether they have actually
Yeah.
benefited out of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a conversation with Ritviz's manager,
Right.
Rahul Sinha, who
Okay.
runs Under the Radar, which also has in their roster. They've also got Nuclear and Anish Sood. And he was telling me that Ritviz's income,
Mm.
streaming has actually increased from 25% to 50% this
Oof.
year.
Wow.
And last financial year,
Mm.
that was like, I think, April 2019 to March this year,
Mm.
his he had 60 million streams for the entire year.
Wow.
Just in
Okay.
April and May this year,
Mm.
he's
Mm.
already crossed 70 million streams.
Just
Ritviz,
for those 2 months. That's
yeah, just for those
insane.
2 months. And Ritviz is the only Indian independent act to
Mm.
have consistently week after week have 5 songs in the Spotify top 200. And now these are his stream counts. Okay, I did a bit of research for you.
Huh.
Uh,
Thank you.
so Urgaye, which is obviously his most popular big
Yeah.
breakthrough song, is nearly 19 million streams.
Wow.
Liggy, another popular track of his, which is the second track that I think Indian independent track to actually hit the Spotify top 10. It has reached as high as number 8, and it's still in the top 10 right now. Kasur by Pratik Guhad is the only other one. It got number 6.
I was just going to
Is
ask
up to
about that.
15.6 million streams.
Okay.
Sage is 10 million. Jeet is 9 million. And Chalo Chale is 6 million. Now, those are his top 5 tracks. Now,
Okay.
I want to just give you a little more comparative data.
Yeah.
To say somebody like Pratik Kuhad, who's also, I suppose, when you talk about now, who's the biggest Indian independent act right now, you'd probably
Yeah.
get a debate between these two guys.
Yeah.
So Pole Mess has got 9 million streams. Dil De Parwa, which was this track on The Duelist, has got 6 million.
Mm.
Tune Kaha, another 6 million. Oh Love, an English song. I mean, Pole Mess also an Indian song, but Oh Love, before he really became so huge, 5.5 million. And Kasur is already up to 3.9 million. So
Wow.
this just gives you an idea how well these guys are doing on streamings. And these
Yeah.
guys are actually making money off streaming, but you have to be huge to
Yeah.
sort of like be actually getting that, because like the I mean, there is no such thing as a per stream rate, but like however they calculate it, where they put it all into a pool and they have pro rata system or whatever it is. At the end of the day, if you are, you have to be right at the top of the table, top of the list to actually be making decent money from streaming. I'm going to give you some more examples just to sort of like, just to give you a little bit of comparison.
Yes, please. Thank you.
And this is Spotify. So Spotify only has data from February 2019, actually March 2019, because they launched like I think February,
correct,
last year, and so it's. But it gives you a fair idea, and I think that why I chose Spotify is not only they're one of the few places where you can actually see the stream counts. JioSaavn is the only other place that you can see it. Ghana has like it gives you in sort of in intervals of like 5 million, so you can see like a song has over 25 million or over 20 million or whatever.
So like that, okay.
Yeah. So so Divine, who's now signed to a major label. Is the next guy, and he's been slightly better than Pratik Gurbaxani, but despite being signed to a major now, he is and having fair amount of presence in Bollywood thanks to Gully Boy, is actually doing slightly less better than Ritviz. Divine, his biggest non-Bollywood song is Chal Bombay with 13 million streams, and this is as we're speaking as of August 2020. Kaam Pachis from the Sacred Game soundtrack, 10 million. Kohinoor, the title track of his album, 9 million. And his top Bollywood song is that song from Gully Boy.
Meri Gali Mein.
No, not Meri Gali Mein. What is it called? The other one, Apna Time Aayega. 16 million. 16 million.
16.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I want to also compare Divine's and Ritviz and Pratik's streams to Badshah, because he is probably the biggest, biggest, I suppose, hip hop act. I mean, if you can call it, act in the country. If you don't look at the independent scene, just look at it overall, and sort of, I guess you would say the biggest non-film act in the country, right? Because it's, now his top track, Genda Fool, which is released earlier this year. As again nearly 19 million, so the same as Urgaye, but of course Urgaye has been around for like a couple of years. His next big track is a song called She Move It Like That, which is 17 million, and the controversial Pagal is actually up to 15 million now. So pretty neck and neck with Ritviz. I'm not counting his Bollywood stuff, and I'm counting his non-film stuff. Again, remember, this is all on Sony, so he has the benefit of major label. Ritviz does not. He has the backing of certain like brands, perhaps, but like I don't know what kind of impact brands. I don't think really have an impact.
No,
on,
they don't.
Audio streaming services the way that say labels do. So Badshah and Ritviz pretty close. So that kind of gives you an idea of the growth of independent music. And yes, there's just these few breakout acts, but like it's possible. It is possible for an independent artist to not be on a label and do amazingly well on audio streaming sites. We're not even talking about YouTube here, because as we discussed it, there are some issues with that.
And I think Pratik itself is such a great example, because even comparing it in the Apple charts, it is consistently in the top 5 for the longest time.
His was the first song. Kasur was the first song to actually Indian independent song to actually top their Apple Music chart. But I mean, we have to realize that Apple is very niche. So if we're talking numbers, and I know Spotify is not necessarily the top streaming service here. I mean, probably Ghana and JioSaavn are like literally 10 times the number of the overall listeners or overall customers. But when you look at engagement, I think there's been enough study that especially when it comes to independent music, Spotify has higher levels of engagement than either of these platforms. So I think that's why I'm taking Spotify as an example. I mean, I love the fact that Apple Music supports independent music a lot. But it is, ultimately it is a fairly niche audience base. And, and to sort of, again, like to continue the answer to your question, I think that independent acts are paying more attention to streaming, and rightfully so. Even when it comes to something like YouTube, Because even when you look at it ironically, YouTube is one of the few places where you can actually monetize your music beyond audio streams, wherein they
Yeah.
have these things where they have these stars, or I think, what do they call, I mean, they have some system where you can, I think stars is Facebook or something. They have these little virtual sort of
Uh,
things that
yeah,
you can
Stars
buy.
is Facebook. Yeah, correct,
Yeah,
correct,
so
correct.
YouTube also has a similar system, right? Where you can actually like gift whatever your favorite artist some stuff, and like
So like
that's
a Patreon kind of thing?
not a Patreon, but I think that it's kind of like similar to stars, where you sort of gift them stuff. Like you gift them essentially virtual gifts, I think, or whatever, and that has some monetary value, so they get that,
Yeah, yeah.
whether it's a badge or something along those lines, and you know so
Okay.
it's possible, but of course there are limitations to that, because you need to have a certain amount of watch time before you can
Ah,
really even monetize your content. So
yeah.
this is the thing, that like what happens is that it's a kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like there was so much of controversy when like Daniel X made that controversial, I mean, that very inflammatory statement to a Music Ally, incidentally,
Oh God, yeah.
about how you have to, like, you can't afford
Yeah.
to this thing,
Yeah.
you can't afford to not
Yeah. That was
uh,
a very unfortunate thing to say.
release music.
Yeah.
But if you ask anybody in the music industry, I mean, just like I'm talking about non-musicians,
Mm.
they will tell you that, look, if you want to do well on music, on audio streaming, or even sort of any kind of audio streaming, you have to be consistent. You have to put out music on a regular basis because of the way the algorithms work, whatever. And I mean, if you kind of look at it in a different perspective, and you look at it, look, you are releasing an album. You've got 12 songs that you want to put out. If you just broke that album up into 12 singles that you release every month, and if it had an impact on your streaming, rather than releasing all 12 tracks at one
At
point and
once.
having and having like only 3 of those songs do well and then 9 of them getting lost, you
Yeah.
know uh, I think that you have to kind of sort of also like
That's
see
good
them.
strategy. Yeah.
Just see the merit in how you want to do it also. Obviously there'll be certain artistic statements when we want to make, where you want to release a body of work and you feel that that is an album, that is a set of songs, it has to be
Together.
listened together. But if it's not, then maybe there's a way for you to figure it out, right? Because
Yeah.
if you look at who is the number one Indian independent artist on YouTube, it's Anyway. Anyway has more than 10 million subscribers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how does he do it? I mean, he is releasing a track. He's like a machine. He releases
Yeah,
new songs
exactly.
every month, sometimes more than one track a month. And
Yeah.
it's just because he's competing with YouTube creators. He's competing with people who are literally like sort of like who are putting up stuff every day. And that's not possible for a musician. Obviously, it's just
Yeah.
not. It's not logically possible. I mean, it does not make sense, and it
Sense.
wouldn't. I mean, obviously, it would be like you wouldn't. The quality of the music would suffer if you try to do it as often as that. But like, he is kind of, you know, that's his competition, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's competing with people who are putting up stuff every day. So this guy has at least kind of put it up once a month.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's consistency and quality, and I think that you have to have a combination of the both of them to firstly want to get to that level. I mean, if you look at all these guys, I mean, whether you look at a Ritviz, I mean, he's not releasing a track every month, but he's releasing a track every few months.
Yeah.
Uh, Somebody like a Pratik who started to adopt that strategy recently.
Yeah.
Divine is doing it, in various forms, whether it's independently, whether it's through Gully Gang,
Yeah.
and his Gully Gang releases,
Yeah.
where he's sometimes a featured artist. So people are doing this, and I think that you know it's really a balance. It's obviously what works for you,
Yeah.
but it's also what works best for your career in terms of how you want to make money out of it.
Correct. So basically consistency and, maintaining quality at a certain point.
I think a balance between that sort of like is essential. You have to, people are constantly I think, reconfiguring. That is the music world today. That whether you look at uh, even a Taylor Swift, who is probably the biggest recording artist in the world right now. now.
Mm.
Her album,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me that even though it was like a 180-degree turn from like doing this pop music, doing like this, I don't know, alternative music,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
indie, and people are calling it indie, very funny, but like this alternative folk kind of music from
Yeah.
being like, from sort of pivoting from country to pop now to this alternative folk
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Her release strategy was essentially following what hip hop acts do. Hip hop acts in the US are
Mm.
doing this sort of like, dropping these surprises releases, large albums with sort of
Mm.
more than a dozen tracks uh,
Yeah.
because that means that people will stream the album in full. If you have 16 tracks, it obviously means that there is you're getting more streams than if you would if you had only
Correct.
10 tracks.
Correct.
She's literally adopted, and she's on a label now that also has a big uh, hip
Hip
hop
hop
roster.
catalog. Okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
so like even she's adopting new strategies,
Mm.
observing what other people are doing, and
Yeah.
I think the Indian space, we don't have this kind of like. Uh,
Insights
I mean, no,
into
I think we have our own kind of market, and we have to look at our own market and
yeah.
see what's working there.
Mm.
And so, obviously, that doesn't mean releasing 16 tracks at once. I mean,
Obviously.
I do like that certain artists are taking stands, and
Yeah.
certain acts like, say, Peter Cat Recording Company that's releasing an album only on Bandcamp, saying that what,
Huh.
audio streaming services suck.
Yeah.
One of our music, you buy it on Bandcamp because we will get the majority of the money from there. I
Yeah.
understand that. I
Yeah.
get that. And if you're taking a stand, you are like firmly putting your money where your mouth is. You will have limited
Exactly.
reach, but you will have all of that money with you.
Yeah.
So but like if you want to play it both ways, I mean, I'm sorry, but like the scene is full. I empathize, but I also sometimes feel that there's a lot of whining.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think they have to like smarten up, like in terms of, understanding that, okay, this is the business. Now we need to do XYZ and get on with it.
Yeah. So
So, yeah. And the thing is, I think that's where people like indie music allies and, all of us who form that enabling, layer between the industry and the musicians come into the picture. So I think they should probably take the enablers a little more seriously and so that, they can actually plan and strategize and say that, okay, let me treat my music as a product and put it out there, but as enablers working with the artists, you understand that they are not just about the numbers, because for them the music is their emotion. So
yeah.
it's if you're like walking on eggshells around them. So that, I think, but they definitely, like you said, I think they need to get that clarity in terms of how to strategize and understand and learn more from industry insights. So I think I just wanted to go back on the, so now in terms of like, yeah, like revenue streams and how much money they make from it,
Mhm.
do you think moving, you said the user based payouts, right?
Mhm.
Could
Yeah.
you go into a little more detail on what those are? Because I think a lot of people who might be listening to this might want to know more about
So
it
as far
and
as I
how that will help.
yeah, so as far as I understand it, that right now how the streaming works is that it all goes into like a central pool, all the royalties, right? And they're
Yeah.
paid out on the basis of usage. So like if say again, like say take somebody like Taylor Swift has got like 90% of the streams, like a very
Mm.
simplistic example for a
Mm.
particular week or month or whatever, she will get 90% of the royalties. But that's
Mm.
because they're looking at the pure volume of it. But like if you look at what the difference is, that now if I as a user did not stream Taylor Swift, I
Yeah.
only streamed say an indie act, like I streamed only Parek and Singh. Okay,
Yeah.
uh, all my money
Mm.
goes to Parek and Singh.
Correct.
So, but otherwise they might be only 0.0000001% of like the entire streams
Correct.
of that month. So they
Yeah.
will receive only 0.0001 uh, of the pool.
Yeah, and that's really unfair, right?
On the other hand, if it's user centric, what happens is that because I only stream them for the entire month, my entire subscription fee will go to them. So,
Yeah, and I think that makes so much more sense. Is there any platform that does that today?
no, like Deezer is apparently experimenting with it. I think in
Okay.
France or something, but like again, they haven't really come out with a report about it. They haven't, there's been. I think that, like I said, there's lots of vested interest in not having this happen because
Yeah,
obviously
lobbies.
we will see maybe the big labels not making as much money as they are making today.
Exactly.
It's all about volumes for them, and you
Yeah.
have it this way. That's going to change. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's very, very crucial for people to know this because a lot of artists today do not understand how royalties are calculated and how streaming revenue works. Because, I've had conversations with people saying that, I have this many streams. So
Mm.
technically, this many streams into
Yeah,
$0.0065,
but
I
that's not
should
how it
get this much.
works, right? It's
That's not
relative
how
to
it
what
works.
everybody else was streaming during
Yeah.
the time period.
Yeah.
Uh, so
So essentially, you are being paid out based on the total, like how many your streams would, wait, let me just get this right. So, depending on the percentage of contribution your streams make
yeah,
to
so
that
it's
week.
essentially it's like I mean, like again, it would be nice for you to go back and confirm this and then maybe edit this out in case it's wrong. But uh, this is my understanding of it. So essentially, it's basically your payouts are sort of relative to what the overall streams are. So
Yeah,
it's not a fixed amount. It's sort
yeah.
of there's an average, obviously. So this is how people get those rates because it
Mm,
averages out,
mm,
over time, and there's
mm.
enough like sort of now enough data because streaming services have been around for a while to
Yeah,
calculate some kind of rough per stream rate. But
yeah.
essentially, it is that you might be streaming 1 million, which is amazing for you, but like
Mm,
it's like they were like maybe 1 billion streams that month.
mm,
Your 1 million
mm.
is still it's only a small
It's
percentage of the
percentage.
overall streams war.
Yeah,
So that's how it's calculated that you get that percentage that you make up of the overall uh,
yeah.
pool, not as opposed to uh, those 1 million streams. And if say 20 people streamed your tracks 1 million times,
Mm.
all the money from those 20 people goes to you if they didn't stream anybody else.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It doesn't work like that, correct.
Yeah.
So essentially, whether you are an indie artist working out of your bedroom or you are Drake, you
Yeah.
are competing against each other when
We
you're
are
putting your
competing.
music out.
It's like, it's essentially that you
Yeah.
are like sort of competing. It's
And with the labels obviously controlling a lot of the plays and playlisting and all of that, there is a lot of manipulation, so to speak. I mean, in terms of like control over where those streams go, you're
I
kind of
don't know
like
whether there's manipulation
directing.
in terms of where those streams go, but there's probably manipulation in terms of how visible a particular release is, right? I
Huh,
mean, things
correct.
like
Yeah.
playlists, something like that. How do you land on a playlist?
Right.
Certain playlists will only have stuff from the major labels,
Yeah.
the mainstream stuff.
Yeah.
Certain playlists will have the indie music tends to be compartmentalized into certain playlists.
Yeah.
I think so. The visibility is, I think, controlled to an extent by the major labels, but not the actual streams. I think that because you have to realize that look, what's great about uh, consumer-driven platforms like audio streaming services and say YouTube, as
Mm.
opposed to radio and TV, is that like the consumer is driving what's popular on and what's heard on those things because the algorithms are driven by what people are listening to,
Yeah.
right? So then
Right.
you randomly put stuff that nobody's listening to
Mm.
because it doesn't benefit them
Correct.
ultimately, right? They want people to listen to more and more music.
Yeah.
Uh, that's how they generate more advertising revenue, all of that. So basically, it means that they so you can be an independent artist who breaks through on these streaming services and then you're sort of like on a level playing field, just as I give you those instances of these independent artists doing
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
So in the sense that like, so I think that's what's great about these DSPs is that
Correct.
ultimately it's the consumer that's driving what is given attention or given sort of the shelf or the visibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
To an extent it's controlled by the labels,
Hmm.
but like it's equally driven by what people are actually listening to.
Yeah. I think it's like a combination of the two.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, like this is 10 years ago, streaming was, it was absolutely new. And I don't think people even, in India at least, nobody was streaming music.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I think, was YouTube around then,
I think
10
it was
years
a
ago?
very nascent stage. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
probably around, but like, yeah, it was around. YouTube was around 10 years ago. Yes. If you're looking at
So,
2010, it was definitely around. Yeah.
yeah. So I just want to know, like, what do you think have been the biggest and most interesting changes in this last one decade? And what has been the biggest like turning points, like influential factors which have kind of changed the game? Of course streaming has a huge impact, but what are the others that you think of?
I mean, really, I think that if you look at the overall kind of growth of independent music,
Hmm.
say 10 years ago to today, it has been fairly exponential, right?
Yeah.
And we look at it from, say, maybe like streaming has obviously been a big part of it.
Hmm.
But I mean, even if you look at it from the point of view that there was barely any label interest in independent music, right? I mean, if you had like today, you actually have independent acts being signed to major labels,
Hmm.
and you have independent labels themselves, which was
Hmm.
not something that was around. And
Hmm.
even in terms of like just the live music industry and how much it has grown, like 10 years ago, we didn't have any festivals. I mean, weekend was first year was I think 2010, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
I'm talking about independent music and festivals, so I wouldn't even count like a Sunburn or something because that was so
No.
much oriented towards sold on
Electronic, yeah.
international talent that was
Yeah.
around.
Hmm.
But like if you look at really and Weekender being consistent, like something that has been staged every year up
Hmm.
until now. Obviously, for this year, it won't happen
Yeah.
because of other reasons. But like,
Yeah.
so you had, I think that was it was I remember it was a really exciting time 10 years ago
Yeah.
to be part of the Indian music industry because you could see it
Opening
acquiring
up.
this critical mass, sort
Yeah.
of like seeing that finally that there were acts that were like to name not just one or two acts, but to have like a bunch of acts that you could say were sort of uh, world class in some sort of
Hmm.
sense, and like who were not just doing it for time pass, who were like there and like really up there with like um, music that you would be proud of, and
Yeah.
like those bands are still around today. I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's an Indian Ocean or a Thermal and a Quarter or a Soulmate
Yeah.
or any of these acts. I mean, they are. I mean, and there were a number of these acts, and you look at the roster of the first weekend, and you can probably see all of them there. And,
Hmm.
it's. I mean, that was what's so exciting that you had live music,
Yeah.
growing. It's only grown since you had now. You just look at the number of festivals we had like 10 years ago, and look at now
Yeah.
we have every like at some stage last year there was like a new festival being around every announced
Every month,
month.
I think,
Every month
almost,
there's a
yeah.
new one like
Yeah.
happening. And I think and this is something I think you also discussed in a previous episode with some of your guests, is how it's now possible to have a career in the music industry,
Yeah.
which was not possible before. You had to be having a day job doing something
Yeah.
completely different.
Yeah.
Now you might still need to have a day job. You probably still do,
Mm.
because not everybody can make enough money.
Correct.
If depending on what your stature is as an artist, you can't necessarily make a living out of just playing gigs
Yeah.
or obviously from your streams. So you
Yeah.
do need to have another full-time gig or
Mm.
even a part-time gig. But what you can do now is that you can be do that within music itself. So you can use your core skill
Mm.
of being a musician to either work at a label or
Mm.
maybe be a music teacher or maybe
Mm.
sort of like be a producer,
Yeah.
in ads or something like that, or like uh, there are various opportunities for you to
Correct.
be within the music industry itself.
So
Uh,
multitasking is crucial,
yeah,
I guess.
and like sort of using your core skill as a musician to make a living, not
Yeah.
necessarily as a not necessarily
As
as
a
a performer,
performer.
not
Huh.
necessarily as a
Correct.
performer,
Yeah.
but as a musician.
As a
Yeah.
musician. Correct. Absolutely. I completely agree. So, I mean, there are so many questions that I have actually because there's so much that's going on in the last 10 years, and in this last 1 year has been exceptionally interesting. Um, what do you think? about, you know, mm, the experience that you had, like in terms of like when you've been covering the international music scene. Is there anything that stands out with the Indian music scene? Or it could be problematic or good, like either way. What do
As,
you think has been, I mean, what are your opinions on that?
are you talking about the industry, like talking about covering the Indian music industry versus the international music?
Yeah, so in the sense, I know that the Indian music industry, so to speak, is split into two. You have the film and the non-film.
Hmm.
And because of that very interesting dynamic, what do you think are the differences that you've seen? Like it affects everything from charts to revenues into streaming to all of that, right? So um, what is the difference that you see in an international situation, like because right now the Indian music industry is a part of the global scene in any case,
Yeah.
but because of the fact that this is being split into two in the country itself, how does that affect it, from an international perspective, if that even makes sense?
I mean, I'm not exactly sure what your question is, but like,
Okay.
I haven't really covered the international music industry as such. I've only observed it. I haven't really reported on it.
Yeah, but based on your observations.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, like, if you look at the kind of conversations that are happening right now in the international music industry, they're not very different from what we have been talking about here, except that, I mean, if you look at, it's just like there, the music industry is so much more evolved, right? If you look at the UK and the UK and the US music scenes, if you look at the UK and the kind of response they've had towards this whole lockdown situation, how the
Yeah.
government has funded,
Yeah.
uh, you know, billions of pounds to help people in the culture sector.
Yeah.
This is something that we cannot even like. I mean, our government doesn't even recognize so many far more essential
Yeah.
activities that that. I mean, I'm not saying the music is not essential, but what I mean to say is that like the benefits,
Yeah.
government benefits don't even sort of accrue to so many different sectors that like musicians and entertainment is so low down the food chain. But
Yeah.
I mean, we had the IPRS giving out those
I was just going to come to
grants,
that. Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
great thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing that they did this. I mean, the one thing that IPRS has been like talked of in a positive light in all these months, but
Yeah.
we have to like be have to give them credit where it's due.
Credit
I mean,
for that.
they
Yeah.
did actually, and I spoke to a bunch of independent musicians who are members of IPRS, and they all said that they had received the grant and that it was fairly prompt. So,
Okay.
I mean, but like if you look at the overall issues like royalties and fair value gap and all those
Mm.
kind of things, the conversations that they have are very similar to the conversations that we're having.
Mm.
It's not particularly different. I think that like you look at certain gaping holes in our industry, like publishing, for instance,
Yeah.
it's something that is an area that like so like such a huge void here that like
Yeah. Nobody
uh,
knows what publishing is.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of nuts that,
Yeah.
like, it's so. I mean, to be honest, these are things that even I am familiarizing myself with over time.
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, this is not something that you've asked me, but, like, really, I've kind of reconfigured myself as a journalist over time, where
Mm.
earlier I was pretty much like your average music journalist, uh, you know, very much tied to a release cycle,
Mm.
tied to news, like an artist centric kind of approach to writing about music,
Yeah.
whether it's somebody releasing a new album or going on tour or a new video and all that, where I've shifted my perspective to really,
Industry.
really learning about the industry
Yeah.
and the workings of the industry.
Yeah.
And it is complicated. It is quite complex,
Yeah.
and it takes a while to understand it, but you will get it eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
I got it. I mean, if I can get it, you can get
I
it.
know, and I mean, I think that's it's great that you've been part of the industry for this long, and you're willing to change your perspective. And I think that is something which I have encountered, like working as a lawyer in the music industry, where you have people like industry veterans, so to speak, who do not want to change their perspective because they're used to a certain kind of industry practice, which is completely in conflict with what is allowed as per law. So I think what has been your experience in terms of like industry practices, like, in your observations on the Indian music industry, um, what do you think can change, and especially for the music industry as a whole, not just about indie or film?
Yeah. So I would say that there's a couple of things. I
Mm.
mean, one of them is, I think, a degree of professionalism
Yeah.
that we need to get in our music industry,
Mm.
which does not necessarily, uh, which is probably not the same as you see um abroad. I mean, I haven't worked abroad, so I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saying purely by observation,
Yeah.
but like in the sense of simple things like, you know, whether it's communication, whether it's sort of the casual approach to how we sort of treat this business,
Mm.
or even like, I think one of the main things that the biggest problem I find with the Indian music industry is there is a lack of transparency.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much opaqueness about the way it
Yeah.
functions, and you know, sometimes whether like even I'm talking about mainstream or indie, I mean, like, there seem to be, obviously in India it's on a much smaller scale, but
Mm.
like there's a fair amount of openness, a fair amount of like you know, transparency. And you know, I constantly say this, that like I attend music conferences for one reason alone, which is to
Mm.
finally get access to data that otherwise is not shared, and
Yeah.
which is shared, I think, because they, you know, that is the only opportunity. And again,
Mm.
it's not verified data, but it's the only
It's
time
just, yeah, it's
you get
information at the end
some
of the day.
data.
Yeah.
You get some data. You know, we don't know on the basis of how.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, to give you an example,
Mm.
we are supposed to have an official Indian music chart that
Mm.
the IMI, which is the
Huh.
official trade body, Indian music industry,
Correct.
worst name in terms of Google.
Mm.
But like, just so they were supposed to launch a official Indian music chart, and that was actually my first story for Billboard, because I mean, it was a very appropriate one considering my history
Yeah.
with like, charts and Billboard and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was it was supposed to launch, I think, last year at some point, and like, it was supposed to launch. Yeah, I think, yeah, last year by the, I think it was supposed to be like towards the end of last year, but now it's like it's almost like a year and a half, and there's been no sign of it. And
Mm.
and and firstly, they had decided that it was only going to be audio streaming because, like we talked about, that was the most genuine of all the data that we
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
Then it was something that became, then they decided, okay, we're going to incorporate YouTube also because YouTube is so big. Then
Yeah.
they said we're going to have a mix of AirPlay. Now, I like,
Airplay. Yeah.
boss, I mean, like,
Mm.
including AirPlay in this, and surely it's like going to have, it's going to be colored in a
Yeah.
print. Uh, so, and they said that there's been great reluctance on the
Mm.
part of labels to actually share this data, to allow this data to be shared,
Ugh.
and like to
Mm.
be made public.
Mm.
Now, firstly, nobody's getting their hands on this data because the chart is compiled by a Singapore-based company called BMAT. So it's going directly from the DSPs to the company.
Company.
Not
Okay.
like your rivals are going to have any
Access to
available
it.
data. I
Mm.
doubt they're going to come out with the actual number of streams. It will be a mere ranking if this is if we know how Indian
Yeah.
things work. I really
Mm.
doubt that they're going to come out and say number one has got X amount of streams across platform.
Yeah. No.
Obviously, they were going to weight it depending on, you
Yeah.
have a weighting system depending on how many users each streaming service had, but it still not happen. And because why? Because they're so reluctant to actually have their data shared. I
Mm.
mean, it's not that you can't get that. You can go into this apps, you can see what's number one, number two, whatever. I do this on a regular basis,
Mm.
uh, but is everybody? No, the casual listener is not doing this. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even know how many like people in the music industry actually, we are not actually entrenched into music
No.
industry. It's not your
I
job.
can guarantee you. No.
Yeah, you know that who's
Yeah.
going to do that. So I mean, this could be a, I mean, it is a testament to the evolution of a country's music industry that it has an official music chart. We've
Yeah.
not got that yet, and I think that
Mm.
is like it is a sign that, we have a long way to go if we can't even count those on official music chart. Now that it's possible. I mean, now that it's possible, like if you talk about another way that streaming services have been a great boon is that now you finally have some data. Like earlier, where was the data? You just had to go on the basis of some label claiming I have this album has gone multi-platinum or this, and nobody knew what is platinum.
Yeah.
Nobody, there was no way to this. And the only chart was we had like Rhythm House chart. There was one small store in like Kala Ghoda in Bombay in one city coming up with a ranking of the songs that are selling.
And they shut also, no?
Their store is being treated as some sort of national, sort of equivalent of what's the most popular music in the country is, which is, so we had no data. Now at least we have some data. Yeah.
So, and going back to the lists, so that means you're saying, so yeah, obviously Billboard doesn't have a list for India, right?
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and why?
Right? Because there's no official data.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. This is
but then streaming services each have their own, right? So you have this company called Chartmetric that tracks, like it's sort of like this. It sort of brings together data from all the different countries and puts it in one place. So you can go to Chartmetric and you can either see the global tally of streams across, say, Apple or Spotify or Amazon. So all the international ones are on there. So like, for instance, you can go to Chartmetric and see, now Apple doesn't share numbers. So you're not getting the actual stream counts, but you can see the chart. So you can see, for instance,
who's leading where type.
Yeah, and you can go to get country specific data. So I wrote a Chartmetric. Now it's like, why don't you talk to Indian DSPs? Why don't you get them on board?
Yeah.
But even that's not happening. So clearly,
No, there's something seriously wrong there. Then is that because which is what I was referring to earlier. So is there some kind of manipulation by the labels?
I don't think there's a manipulation in terms of the songs that are popular there. There's probably manipulation what their overall MAUs are. Because that's the thing, right? I mean, this is a joke that I often make. According to the IMI last year, there were 150 million users, monthly active users across streaming services. But we had 3 streaming services that each claimed 100 million active users. So you had like a Ghana, a JioSaavn, and a Wink all claiming 100 million active users, which is 300 million across 3 platforms in a country that has 9 platforms. Whereas the official industry trade body is telling you we have only 150 MAUs. So this was, I think, in 2018 or 20. I mean, I don't know. That's the figures change, but I mean, that just shows you the thing. So I think the reluctance is more, if I know how many streams your tracks are getting, obviously I'll get some idea of how many monthly active users you actually have. Right? I don't think the songs themselves are being, the rankings of the songs themselves are being manipulated. Like I said, I haven't heard any such thing. I don't think there is, I mean, as far as I know, that's not happening. But what's definitely suspect is the number of actual monthly active users. We don't know whether there's no way to verify whether these guys actually have those numbers that they're claiming.
I think, like you said, transparency is something that really needs to kick in at the earliest. And now, time will tell, but I'm hoping with IPRS announcing, 2.0, there will be some improvement in the way they work and how their platform works as well, and have some kind of transparency in terms of having access to a dashboard, something as basic as that. So like for artists, so if you're registered, most of the international copyright societies allow you to register your work online and track where your music is being played and how much money you've made. So there's no visibility as of now, something as basic as that. And this is something which was executed like 15 years ago outside. So there's a lot of catching up to do. And so I think, there is so much of information that is out there but not accessible to a lot of people. So that's why, thank you so much for taking time out to do this, because what we have discussed today is not something you'll find anywhere. Like, I've realized how there's there's barely any information on the Indian music industry. So there are a few people that I, keenly follow, and you are definitely one of them. So thank you.
Thanks, Samir. I keenly follow you as well. As you
Thank you
know,
so
that
much.
I often come to you whenever I have any sort of legal query and I don't
Yeah.
understand something. You're the first person I ask.
Thank you. That, like, it's validation at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up this whole thing, you've had a very interesting, 18, 17 years as a journalist. So
Mhm.
what's your advice to people who want to take this up? Like, people who have a genuine interest in music and want to take up music journalism. How feasible is it? And, in terms of career, income, all of that.
So now is not a particularly great time to be a journalist. And forget, and to be a music journalist is probably even worse because there's like it's like a hyper niche within like the whole journalism field.
Yeah, yeah.
But my advice to anybody who wants to be a music journalist has really been simple and essentially the same. Like in all the years I've been asked the question, which is like just listen
Yeah,
to as much music as you can, watch as much
yeah.
as you can. You go to as many gigs as you can. It's probably not possible now, but watch as much live streams or whatever. Listen, consume as much music. Just consume as much music as possible, and write as much as possible. Write, keep writing. Uh, you will. The only way you will get better at it is if you keep doing more
Keep
of it,
writing.
and you have to have somebody who's like. It doesn't have to be published, but you do need to have. And this is something that whether you're a writer, whether you're a musician, if
Mm.
you're in a creative professional, it's
Mm.
very important to have somebody give you honest feedback
Yeah,
and be willing to take that feedback and be willing and open to I mean a lot of this also has to do with I will say some amount of it is basically circumstantial and driven by luck because not everybody can have like a great editor or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
have somebody who's there to kind of really give you that honest feedback but uh, you know have we all have people whose opinions we respect. Hopefully, if you can find somebody who, if you're a musician, there's somebody amongst your circle who is uh, somebody who who shares similar kind of taste
Yeah,
with you. I mean, whether you're a musician, whether you're a writer, whether you're come from similar spaces, have them be your sounding board and
yeah,
ask them for a genuine opinion. I mean, the thing is that like you have a lot of music writers that may not. I mean, it's not about having a flair. I often say that a flair for writing will come over time.
yeah. That's
What
true.
will not come
It's an
is
interest in music.
not only just an interest, but like what essentially I think that again, like I say, this is across any creative industry.
Right.
You have to find a unique voice. That is
Yeah.
the only way that you will stand out.
Mm.
Everybody loves music. Everybody wants to write about it. But like, how do you make a career out of it? Only if you're extra special will you be able to make a career out of it. And how do you become extra special? You don't have to. You only can be that if you say something that nobody else is saying, or you say something in a way that nobody else is saying, and you
Correct.
have to find new angles to look at the same old thing,
Yeah.
or talk about something that nobody else is talking about.
Mm.
You know that's
Covering angles. Yeah,
that's what
like,
makes you good. It's not
correct.
about like it's not your grammar, it's not your your the publications that you write for. It's what your voice is, and
Yeah.
like how do you, and you have to develop that voice, and you have to actively develop it, and the only way you can do that is just keep writing, keep listening, and keep seeking feedback, and like just hone that over time, and it's like
Yeah.
that's pretty much like the standard advice I have for like every I've had for like the longest time.
Yeah, well, that's some pretty solid advice because, I mean, like you said, especially finding that
Yeah.
what you represent, what you're writing about. Like, for example, what you do in terms of the journalism that you handle or you are part of is on the industry side of things, insights, and a lot of it, which isn't covered by most of the other people. So
I mean,
it's very unique that way. Yeah.
I have a simple rule about my own writing, and it's really, this is my rule, that if I write something, is somebody who reads it getting to know something new that they didn't know before. Uh, if they don't, then I have failed. If they do learn something, and it could be something very random and specific. I mean, very random, specific. It could be just something simple as like uh, an aspect of somebody's career that they didn't know about, or a fact
Yeah.
about somebody that they didn't know about. But have I been able to echo out something new from this research or from this interview, or something, or an observation from the music? I mean, that's all. That's just my litmus test. Is there
Right.
something new that I have managed to
Okay.
inform people about? And like continuing with that point, and I know I'm sort of kind of bringing together musicians and writers, and they're very different. And I think the only thing is, like I said, they're both creative
Creative, correct. Yeah.
professionals. But like I often see this, and I feel that whether you're pitching an article idea
Right.
or whether you're pitching for a playlist, you have to look at the same angle, right? You have to look at the same, take the same approach, which is
Yeah.
essentially like you'll often get like I know music journalists will agree with me here that you get so many emails from people saying, this is
Yeah.
my new single, can you please write about it, this is my new
Right.
album, and a couple of lines about it. But like, what's the story? Like, you need to tell me the story. You need to tell me what makes this different, what's interesting. I mean, like, this is and this is something that I've heard, I think, on a Music Ally seminar, wherein so somebody from the streaming services said that, like, I think it was Spotify, and talking about pitching to Spotify, and they said that, look, when you're writing a pitch, you have to, like, it's like you're literally writing a brief for an article. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell me about the making of the song and who you wrote it with and blah blah, and your collaborators and all of that. That is just information. I need to know the story behind your song.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
need to know, I need to form some sort of connection,
Yeah.
whether that's an intellectual connection or an emotional connection.
Yeah.
That's the way that I'll be convinced.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I'm sure you're receiving a lot of people, a lot of artists like writing into you
Yeah, yeah,
about,
I've said it many times
like,
before, doesn't make
yeah.
any sense, but I'm just
No,
saying
but
it again.
like, there are so many artists releasing music, especially with the pandemic hitting. Like, my conversation with Ritika as well was
Yeah.
about that, and it is just how they have to approach a music journalist is also something very crucial. So I think this is great advice, even to the artists who are like listening in. So yeah, thank you so much, Amit. I mean, it's been like I said, with every guest that I've had on the show, I think I have so many more questions, but I think I'm just going to bug you offline,
Yeah.
and I maybe probably like do something in terms of with indie music allies. Actually, yeah. Before we wrap up,
Mhm.
that is something which I'd like you to talk about: indie music allies and how you became a part of it, and um, you know what do you think it's going to do for the music community?
So, I mean, I won't go into too much detail about indie music allies
Mm.
because right now we've closed membership. We do want to open it up after a little point of time. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's why I don't want to talk too much about it, because it's not like something that people can become a
Yeah.
part of at the moment. But essentially, what it is
Mm.
like we talked about this. It is an enabler, not a service.
Mm.
What we again came out of the whole lockdown situation. The origin was artists would at sea. They had no, like, really confused about, now I have no income from live gigs. I don't
Yeah.
know how I'm going to record my music.
Yeah.
And all these conversations happening, over the internet, and people having similar conversations, and me and my co-founders sort of
Yeah.
like wanting to all having a similar idea where essentially, look, there's no such, I mean, one of the things that's greatly lacking is a sense of community. And if you can just bring together, everybody who's essentially going through the same thing,
Yeah.
and, there's kind of like power in numbers, and, there's so many things that when you come together, there's so many things that you can do in terms of sharing resources, in terms of problem solving,
Correct.
all of those kind of things. So that's really the origin of Indie Music Allies. And bringing together people from, I mean, the majority of our membership is musicians, like over 50%, but we also have everybody across, like connected to the Indian independent music industry, whether that's, uh, artist managers, whether it's gig promoters, whether it's lawyers like yourself, there's journalists, there's a whole bunch of different professions, sound engineers,
Yeah.
And just basically coming together. And so far, what we've been doing is really, we've been taking it really slow and steady. All of us have full-time jobs, so we want to take our time but do it right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, like, people must be wondering, like, a lot of organizations come and, like, straight off the bat they start doing stuff, but like we are doing it in a way that we really want to sort of like
Build a base. Yeah.
impact, like, we don't necessarily want to reach like 1,000 people. If we reach 10 people, but we actually make a difference to their lives, then that's essentially what we want to do. So we are going to do certain things like workshops, and workshops oriented towards specific areas, whether it's legal, whether it's PR, and press, or whether it's like mental health, all the sort of aspects that, all the, so people in the music industry are concerned about, and sort of and impact them on a daily basis.
Correct.
We also have a Facebook page which is actually open to everybody. So because we were limited, we decided to limit the number of members that we would take, because we still want to figure out how we can do this, how we can best
Correct.
Contribute to the scene. The idea is to deal, like I said, very closely with, again, a voluntary organization, we're a non-profit organization. We're trying to do our sort of like, again, like, like I said, maybe just have a smaller membership, but like have a greater impact. And so, but our Facebook page is open to all. Anybody can become a member on that. And
Of the
we
group,
are,
right? The Facebook group.
Facebook group, Indie Music Allies. And on that, we're sharing resources. We're sharing a bunch of resources. There's a place for people to come and, also post stuff. You can post your own release there. You can, we try to have conversations there, share news, related to music industry, really sort of be a kind of forum for exchange of ideas and information. So like everybody's welcome to join that Facebook group, and hopefully maybe we will gradually increase our membership after some time when we have figured out sort of
game plan,
how we're going along.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, great. So once again, I mean, wrapping up today's episode. Thank you so much, Amit. It's
Thank you
been
so much for having me and like allowing me to ramble on, because like I say a lot.
No, that's great, because I love chatting and I love listening to all this information that you've had to share. And I think I wish I'd made notes, but since we have this as a recording, that's great. So, I mean, it's been an enlightening session. So I think, I'm definitely going to be bugging you for more information, because it helps me like structure my advice to people as well. So that's great.
Yeah, I'll be doing the same.
That is give and take. Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I will speak to you soon, and I will see you in the next episode.